This is how to build a private practice, the Numerapy model with Dr. Jordan Harris and Paul Peterson. I'm Dr. Jordan Harris. I'll give a brief bio about myself, but before I do that, we have the honor of being here because of APA Division 29. So I'm going to kick it over to them to give a few words before we begin. You are muted.
That's helpful to know. Thank you. So welcome everyone on the event, How to Build a Private Practice. This event was hosted by, as Dr. Harris mentioned, the Early Career Psychologists, ECP, Division of 29 Committee. I'm Dr. Michelle Joaquin. I'm a New York and California licensed psychologist in private practice. I'm also the APA Division 29 ECP Committee Chair. APA Division 29 has many different committees, including for students, for social justice, diversity, private practice, etc. And we're always happy to get new members to the division. So I'm going to add the link on how to join APA's Division 29 on the chat. And I just want to give a warm welcome to everyone for joining us today and kick it back to Dr. Harris. We're very excited to have you here with us today.
Glad to be here. Yeah, so my name is Dr. Jordan Harris. I'm a marriage and family therapist and a professional counselor. And I live and work out of Arkansas, so the middle of the state, but I'm originally from Maryland.
Hey everyone, Paul Peterson. I'm also an LMFT and LPC. Live in Arkansas and run a private practice there, as well as a little bit of this consulting stuff. And been doing that since, I guess, 2018. And really excited to help anyone who wants to have a private practice to do it. It's been a lot of freedom and a lot of been able to help people in a very specific way. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So Paul and I are co-owners, co-developers of what we call Private Practice Incubator. And in a nutshell, what we do in Private Practice Incubator is we help clinicians to make more money and to help more people. That's it. Those are the two big goals that we have. For me, this is really important because definitely for myself, when I started this journey, starting a private practice felt like this. It's sort of ironic to me, or funny in a way. I don't think any programs, like no programs that I know of, have any sort of business training. But for, I think, many of us, the best way to make a good living in this field is to go into private practice. Not for all of us, but I think for many of us. And the irony of that, though, is that we have like almost no business training at all. You know, and so we know all about, you know, doing treatment plans and writing notes and, you know, different models. But then when it comes to like the basics of like, what is net income? What is gross income? What is an LLC? We're just like completely lost. And I don't think it has to be that way, right? I really like this picture because definitely for me in starting my own practice, I had people all along the way who were literally giving me a hand. And I really think that if we can do that, it makes the journey much easier. Now, I also want to say that when Paul and I first started doing a lot of this business consulting, we kind of told people that it was easy. And I think that was because we were sort of already at the mountaintop, right? And we had sort of forgotten that the journey up to the top was kind of a slog. And so I don't say that to like, to discourage you. I want to set appropriate expectations, but then also to let you know that the journey up the mountain, if it feels hard for you, that is totally normal because it is a big journey. But I think I can speak for me and Paul as I say this of, when you get to the top of the mountain, man, the vision, the view is totally worth it. And then coming back down on the backside, things are way, way easier. Which brings us to our big mission for today. Our mission is to give you an overview of how to build a thriving private practice. In order to accomplish this mission, we're going to have 3 main goals. The first goal is to identify the 2 most important variables in having a successful practice. The next is to review strategies to address these variables. And then finally, we're going to address the biggest barrier to starting a practice. I actually like revamped a lot of this presentation yesterday, like the last minute, because of some stuff I saw on social media and what I've been thinking a lot about recently. On one of the popular Facebook groups, someone asked a question about why people don't join coaching programs and that sort of thing. And the really big answer that came up again and again as I read all the comments was that trust. People don't know who to trust. There's a lot of charlatans out there, a lot of people who basically aren't honest and upfront. And I think that I think trust is so important. I think we see it nationally right now. There's a huge erosion of trust. And you see it in our own practices, right? And so the only way I know to build trust is to just be honest with you. So in this training, I hope to do a bunch of different things. One is I'm just going to tell you the answers, right? We're not going to hold back and say, well, that's behind a paywall or whatever. We're just going to tell you what we would do. And I hope that then, if in the future you want to work with us, you know exactly what you're going to get, because we're going to tell you what we would do, and then we're going to help you do it. The other side of that, though, is also we're going to tell you the parts that we're not really good at yet, right? So you can be very, very open on that side of it. And lastly, a lot of our responses as you ask questions, and we hope you ask questions. Paul will be taking questions and feeding them to me throughout the presentation. Will be very specific, very nuanced, right? Because that's the level at which we have to work if you want to have if you want to have a thriving private practice. So let's just jump in. What are the 2 most important variables in your practice? Let's take a moment and put what you think in the chat. We'll take about 30 seconds for this. In the chat, what do you think are the 2 most important variables in your practice? Okay, we're starting to have some responses coming in. Marketing and retention, pipeline referring and marketing, lead generation, client retention, competence and marketing, niche and marketing, referrals, finding your market, referrals and marketing, managing my time, energy, communication, niche, referrals, numbers of sessions per week and income per session, insurance, knowledge, administrative abilities. Some of these are really good. These are like hit the nail on the head. I like this a lot. All right, so you have your answers. Let's see what we have found. So when I first started my practice, I started my practice in 2022, which is not that long ago. I had already failed twice to start my own practice. And I was working at a group practice and paying them about 30% to, do my billing and get clients and all that sort of stuff. I think a pretty standard sort of setup for many of us. And I was not making the kind of money that I wanted to make. And I was really feeling the pressure because in June of that year, we were slated to have our 3rd kid. So I have 3 kids. Wife is full-time stay-at-home mom. My mom lives with us. And so I'm like sole provider for 6. And I was like, this is not working, guys. You know, I think I had maxed out at like 16 clients a week that I was seeing. And Paul had started his practice in 2018. And he was like, oh, just make the leap, man. It'll be great. I'll coach you through it. Right. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll totally do this. And we did it. And even before we were done, I saw that Paul really had a really great system. And I said, Paul, if we just codify this, we can do this for tons of people. And like literally that happened in January, I think. And by April, we had our first people who we were coaching. And the person, we had one graduate, and he has a booming practice now. And so it was like the proof was in the pudding. We started off really small and it worked. And so we talked a lot about, okay, what are the core factors in your business? And what we realized was that it really comes down to 4 big numbers. Your find me number, which is how many people are finding you in whatever way that is. Your call me number, how many people are actually calling your phone per week. Your book me number, how many of them actually book with you. And then finally, your keep me number, how long they stay in therapy with you. And once we discovered that this was how we can determine the health of a practice, I talked to Paul, and Paul built this really beautiful calculator. And I just want to sort of demo this for a second so you can sort of get a sense of how this works, okay? Let's say that you have 4 people. Can you all see my screen with this calculator up here? Give me a thumbs up, beautiful. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Let's say you have 4 people calling your phone a week. Half of them actually book with you. And your average client comes for about 8 sessions. What that means is that about week 9, you'll reach 16 clients. And then you never grow past that number. This was me before in my group practice. And this is because even though you have 2 clients coming in every week, you have about 2 leaving your practice. And so you never really grow. Now, you know, if your comfortable caseload number is 25, this is a problem, right? If you want to be seeing 25 clients a week, this is a really big problem. If, on the other hand, your comfortable caseload number is 16, 16 is your sweet spot, this is totally fine, right? And so when we sort of figured this out, what we realized was there's lots of different variables that you can tweak. But for most of us, the most important ones are your call me number and your keep me number. So let's just play around with that just a little bit more, right? If you have, let's say, 6 people calling your phone a week, half of them become clients. Then at week 9, you max out at 24 clients a week. That's much closer to, in this scenario, what would be a comfortable caseload for you. On the other hand, let's say that you manage to get your clients to come in for 12 sessions. At week 13, you then max out at 24 clients. Okay. Now, there are other variables that you can change, but what we found is that these are the most important variables. And we really feel like knowing this is very important because it tells you what's the target in your practice. And what we have seen is that for most clinicians, when we don't have clarity, we often default to solving almost like an easier problem. I'll give you an example. So when I first started my practice, I charged what was for me an astronomical rate. I charged $325 for an 80-minute session. And I mean, it was so high that every time someone called my phone, I would like gulp a little bit. I was like, this is crazy. Like, he's going to actually pay me $325 cash. Like, it was just like insane. But I did that partially because I knew that I wanted to focus on the most important problem, right? Which was that no one was calling my phone. And I'm sure you've all had this experience, right? Where you get someone on, you get your like one call for like 2 weeks, and they ask you, and you actually do like the whole thing, and they're like, oh, you sound like you'd be a really good fit. I saw your website, my friend recommended you. Do you take my insurance? And you say, what insurance do you have? Like hoping that you have their insurance. And then they say, I have, I don't know, window insurance through window company. And you go, I'm sorry, I don't take window insurance. And they say, what's your rate? And something in your brain goes, lower your freaking rates, because you will not have a client, and then you'll not eat, and everyone's going to be poor, and you're going to be on the street, and you might as well call your mom and just move back home. You know, like it just all happens like so fast. And so it's such a common thing, but lowering your rates in that situation, at least for me, doesn't solve the problem. Because getting one call a week or every 2 weeks, which is not enough to sustain a practice. And so that's why, while there are a bunch of different numbers that we look at in someone's practice, the two most important ones we believe are the call me number and the keep me number. And instead of focusing on easier problems, we really focus on these problems first. Of course, we talk about rates. Of course, we talk about insurance. Of course, we talk about having an LLC or having an S Corp and all those sort of different things. But the most important thing that we found is these two numbers. I want to say something else on this topic. I know that people have different strategies and approaches and views on how long clients stay in therapy. Paul and I are pretty agnostic in terms of how we coach people on how long clients should stay in therapy. Like, you do what fits best for you. But we do want to be very clear. If you're a brief therapist, you're going to have to up this call me number. And if you aren't a brief therapist, then you can actually have a pretty low call me number. I think sometimes this gets a little bit skewed in our perspective, because I think a lot of university professors actually have very small caseloads because they also have a job as a professor. So they're not like thinking about the clinical work as their full-time job. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't. And so when they have shorter term caseloads, they just never faced with this sort of conundrum of like, can I pay my bills? So I think that sometimes skews our view. I've seen that with a few people. I also want to say, people often ask at this point, like, what do we mean by like long-term therapy or longer sessions? And we find the cutoff is right around 13, 14, 15 sessions. That's what we mean by like longer term in terms of like having a healthy practice. So we don't mean like 30 sessions of people coming in for years and years, but right around that 13 to 15 range. It tends to tilt the ease of which it is to maintain a full caseload. Okay. Any questions? Do we have any questions in the chat, Paul?
We don't right now.
We don't. Okay. Please feel free at any point to ask a question in the chat. Raise your hand. Paul's going to let me know, and then we're more than happy to answer any questions. So, and the question is, what are strategies to address these two variables? How do you actually do this thing, right? And what do you think? Drop it in the chat. I'll give you 30 seconds. what do you think are the best strategies for having a strong call me number and a strong keep me number? All right, we're getting some responses. Networking, strong sources of referrals, paid ads for fast growth, organic content for slow growth, maybe. Investment in marketing, and then meeting the needs of clients once connected. Networking, various services offered. Niching is such a big thing that we talk about all the time. Niching, networking, marketing. Okay. A few more seconds to see if anyone wants to dive in here. Culturally competent care, that's really important as well. Our call me answer, what we call the marketing flywheel. We recommend that people get a Google profile, that they start some sort of newsletter or a blog, and they do public speaking. And our sense is that these three things all feed into each other, right? So a Google profile is basically like an online listing on Google. I'm going to say this, and I feel so funny saying this because I'm probably going to say this for like the last time. It's like a yellow paging. It's like a yellow pages listing. We're getting to the point where people won't know what that means in maybe like 2 or 3 years, right? About the yellow pages. It's like a dictionary, but for like pizza stores. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what it was. But yeah, your Google listing is like the modern day yellow pages. And that will drive traffic to a website where some people will sign up for your services. Some of them will join your newsletter. And if you have a newsletter, right, it's a way to remind people that you're there, that you offer your services. And it gives you credibility when you're just talking to potential referral sources and you want to give a speaking engagement. And then the more people who come to your speaking engagements, the more they can rate your Google profile, which drives more traffic to your website and your newsletter. So now you get more speaking engagements, and it becomes this sort of virtuous cycle. Okay. There's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of nuance. That goes beyond the scope of this 1-hour training that we can offer. But I do want to say, if you have any questions about starting a Google business profile, you can just Google it, right? There are plenty of YouTube videos and tutorials that will teach you how to do it. Paul and I have seen this go both ways, right? Paul and I are kind of people who we're very much self-starters. And so we can watch a video like this and we can go. We also have worked with people who they really need the support, the clarity. And so sometimes they ask us for help, right? And so I just want to announce that this is for some people, technology and business is sort of intuitive. And for some of us, it's not. And if you're not that kind of person, that's totally okay. There are resources out there that can help you and guide you in this process. And a lot of them you can find online. I just want to give you a quick little view. This is what my Google profile looks like. And so if you were to search me or a business near you in Google, it's going to pop right up. And this is really important because it's how people in your area find you online. Many times your ideal client is literally wandering through the internet, just like looking for you, and they just can't find you. And so we found this to be a great way. This is one strategy to get people to actually know that you're available for services. Okay. We really like also starting a newsletter. We felt like this is a way to keep to stay in front of mind for people, right? Sometimes a client might reach out to you, and maybe you can't see them, or maybe they can't pay your rate, or maybe they're not ready for therapy. But if they're on your newsletter and you send them a letter a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, they might come back in. This happens to us regularly. I think of it as like an easy way to start like a wait list, right? But it's not a wait list. Just a little, it's just a list of people who have basically said, hey, we like your stuff that you're putting out there, and we want to stay in touch with you. This is also a way to market for your trainings. So one of the things that me and a guy in our coaching program did this past, we've done this twice since January, is I'm kind of in like the perinatal space in this area. So we went to local hospitals and we gave trainings, and then on my newsletter I can invite people to the trainings. And so having something like this helped you to have credibility when you're contacting referral sources, right? We also like the idea of targeting referral sources instead of clients directly, because if you get one client, you get one client. But if you get one referral source, you get 10 clients. Of course, that math isn't exact, but that's the general idea, right? So yeah. So that's our flywheel. Any questions? Are we still good, Paul?
Justin just had a question come in about getting into public speaking and how to do that.
Yeah. So part of that is getting your niche, and part of that is a numbers game. What we have found is very often the people on the other side of the phone are busy, right? And so I'll give you an example. We wanted to give a few trainings to the perinatal community in our area. And so we called up a bunch of hospitals. Hospitals often give like birthing classes and that sort of stuff. And we got one hospital that actually called us back. And we know why, right? It's because the nurse navigators on the other side are busy. You know, they're working their own shifts. They get tons of emails. They're dealing with doctors. It's dealing with you know, sleep deprived dads, new moms. Like they're just really, really busy. And so we had to, one, demonstrate we had some sort of clout or status, which helped with the newsletter, right? Having this thing, hey, I have this thing. But then also emailing a ton of people. And this is something we see often with people who we mentor. They will email like 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 nurse navigators, 2 or 3 pastors, 2 or 3 committees, 2 or 3 whatever, and they wait for a response. And we have to say, hey, like, think in terms of like emailing like 50 people, right? Every day. We have a guy he works with creatives, musicians, artists, that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, he saw a dramatic increase in the number of people and the number of hits that he was getting when he upped his numbers, right? So contacting all of the museums in the area, contacting all of the music shops in the area, contacting a bunch of the music teachers. Like it was more of a volume game, doing high volume, than being sort of smart and picking the right one. So those are just a few pointers on how to do that well.
A couple more questions, Jordan, if you're open to it.
Yeah.
What service do you use for newsletters?
Great question. So we run everything through Wix. We really like that. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. We actually teach a way to do it through Google in our program for people just starting out. And what we have found is that the biggest barrier actually isn't what is the right service to do it through. It's to just start sending out the newsletters. And so we use Wix, love Wix. If you've gotten any of my email campaigns throughout this time, that's all through Wix. And Wix also gives you good websites. I mean, Wix also does your website, right? So some people want to do something like oh my gosh, Substack. Substack is only for blogs. It doesn't really give you a clean website. So there's different ways to do it, but I would say more than anything is just start doing it. The number of people who I follow online, they're not therapists, but they're like in finance or something else, who literally started by sending out 50 emails to their friends and families is really high. And so for most people, just getting started is like the first step.
And then one more, Jordan. Yuji is asking how often you send them out and how much time you spend on research and writing.
Great question. We ask for a minimum of once per month. Personally, I like the cadence of once per week. And I spend, it really depends on a lot of different factors. When I've tallied up my time, it was about 8 hours a week. I don't think yours has to be that intensive. But I do think putting in 3 to 4 hours a week would probably be about normal. One of the things that we often tell people to do, we call it Rule 7, which is never reinvent the wheel. So if you're giving a presentation, like on perinatal issues, right? All that content you repurpose for your newsletter. And an hour-long presentation, you can get, I don't know, 5 blogs out of that, 5 newsletters out of that. And so as much as you can, repurpose all of your content. So yeah. Okay. Our keep me answer. We call this the retention pyramid. And it has 3 levels to it. Taking insurance, customer service, and then the therapeutic alliance. So look, insurance is like a tricky thing for a lot of us, right? Many insurances are a headache to work with, just a nightmare. Calling them, figuring out why they didn't get reimbursed, figuring out why this person has to have an authorization, this person doesn't, why so-and-so has federal Blue Cross Blue Shield, and that's different than state Blue Cross. Like, it's just it can be a real nightmare. And then especially when they don't pay very well, it can be like, what the heck is going on here? We do want to be very open though. We've seen this really boost retention. When clients pay a copay or even sometimes nothing, especially as you get later in the year. Yeah, I mean, clients really like insurance. So yeah, we are agnostic about whether or not you should take it. But we do want to be very overt and say, we've seen it help. The big secret though to taking insurance that we found is only take one. Right? There's usually one that pays really well in your area. And if you get good at one, you don't have to worry about the other 8. That can be a headache, and just take the one. We've also seen very often that therapists often struggle with customer service. One of the really common things that we see is people call us on the phone and they'll say something like, wow, you got back to us so fast. We called 3 different people and none of them have gotten back to us yet. And I've also seen this in my own life, right? When I needed a therapist, calling people up, people not getting back to me. And so one of the easiest ways to do this is to implement a 24-hour response policy. That you get back to emails, to phone calls, whatever it is, from potential clients within 24 hours. It sounds silly, me saying this, but when the phone calls, answer the phone. Yeah. And then the third thing that we've seen is what we call the therapeutic alliance. What is the therapeutic alliance? Put it in the chat. If you had to summarize what the therapeutic alliance is, what would you say? I'll give you about 30 seconds for this. All right, rapport, goodness of fit between client and therapist. Client sense that the therapist is with them. The strength of the relationship between client and therapist. Culturally informed, DEI-oriented therapy. Goodness of fit, agreement of treatment, and agreement on approach. Okay, we got a bunch of different ideas. Let's see what the research says. In the research, there's sort of like, there's 4 parts, but there's 3 legs. I'm going to focus on these 3 legs, right? Most of the time, when we talk about therapeutic alliance, most people think of it as my relationship with my client. And that is very important. Technically speaking, though, there are other parts of the alliance that are also really important, which is agreement on the goals of therapy and on the way to reach those goals or the tasks of therapy. All 3 of those are really sort of the core of the therapeutic alliance. And then you also, of course, have other things like that might be really specific to the relationship, right? Cultural identity, worldview, that sort of stuff. I think a good example of this is like the COVID vaccine situation, right? Some people had a different goal, right? Some people thought the goal is to not get sick. Some people thought, oh, it doesn't really matter. That's not my goal. I'm not worried about this virus, right? And so if you're a physician and you're saying, hey, take this vaccine, but your patient is saying, that's not my goal, I don't care about getting sick, like treatment is not going to work. And I think we saw that, right? The other side of that is, what do you do to reach this goal? Some people wore masks, right? Some people took the vaccine. Some people did other things. And who you were really, really changed. Or who you were really changed the goal of that. So like, I got the vaccine. I felt comfortable with that. My wife was pregnant with our second kid when this all happened. She did not feel comfortable getting a new vaccine then. So she waited until after she had the baby to get the vaccine, right? All of those things come into play when it comes to like, how do you do treatment? So if you were her doctor and the goal is to not get sick, what you would suggest to her something very, very different than what you would suggest to like me, right? And I think of this as, it's not just about how good our clients feel about us. It's also about the level of confidence and hope that we inspire, right? I don't know if you've ever been to a doctor and they're really nice, but you're like, this person is not like solving my problem. Like they just don't get that, like, I'm in pain, my back hurts, I have this rash, whatever it is. Like they don't sometimes doctors, oh, we'll just take a look at it. And you're like, I don't think you are taking this as seriously and I don't feel like you're as competent as I need you to be. I think that's sort of what these factors are sort of getting at. Any questions on that stuff before we move on to the last part? Okay. And the biggest barrier to starting.
Jordan, one question did come in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Justin, how do you reliably and predictably inspire confidence?
Great question. So we have what we call the anti-dropout framework in our program. And basically, we really hone in on how you build the alliance, right? That's the short answer. The other side of that is you often have to work with a coach where they're watching your tapes and giving you feedback on things that you might be missing, right? Maybe that sounds weird, even though I'm fully licensed and have a doctorate. I still have a coach I meet with once a week because I'm always trying to improve. And so that's sort of the thing. Really doubling down on the therapeutic alliance, and then also really focusing in and watching tape with your coach. My own practice, my average client came for about 4 sessions. And then I just insanely doubled down on the therapeutic alliance, really taking the first 2 to 3 sessions to get clear on the goals and tasks of therapy and building the relationship. And my average client came in for 19 sessions, I think, after that. So that's my own anecdotal experience, but that's what we've seen help. Anything else?
That's all for now.
Okay. All right. What's the biggest barrier that you think to starting a practice? Imposter syndrome. Big one. What else? Psychological blocks. Wow, people are really on it today. It was a huge surprise to us to realize that most people struggle with mindset issues. I used to watch all these like videos of how to be successful, yada, yada, yada. And they were all like mindset, mindset, mindset. And I thought, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. Changing your mindset won't bring you more clients. And I was shocked to discover that most people that we work with, the biggest barrier is actually not the tactics. It's the mindset stuff. It's really pricked in me a deep sense of empathy. And I've been more aware of that in my own life. I think, there's different variations of this. There's shame, there's imposter syndrome, there's like cultural stuff, right? Like, I remember very clearly not getting a lot of clients. And I work in a predominantly white area. And I was like, man, this has got to be racially charged. Like, why am I not getting enough people to coming in? And I have people who I'm like, this person is not as effective as I am. They're not good. They're not trying as hard. And they were white, or usually they were white. And it was like, man, this is like this doesn't feel fair. And so I think a lot of this can come into different parts of our identity. And sometimes, right, like that is true. That is true. And I think that's almost the hardest part of this to like deal with, when there's some truth to that. And so I really want to acknowledge that, right? Like, that is a painful part of what it means to be a minority in this country. And I also want to say that for some of us, and sometimes, it is like not only what's happening outside of us, but it's also what's happening inside of our heads, inside of our minds. This is the part that we're not really great in our practice at dealing with. And if I'm being honest, I've sort of shied away from this, mostly because I don't want to cross boundaries with people who I'm coaching and turn into their therapists. So this is the part that we're really working on and that we're going to have to try to figure out, because it is a big need in people that we're working with. That being said, we've sort of brainstormed and thought through a few different ideas of how people can begin to sort of break through some of these mindset challenges. The first one is the $1 challenge. So I don't know, 3-4 years ago, an influencer that I really like online, Jack Butcher, posted this tweet: a tiny challenge that will change your life. Make $1 on the internet. I took this challenge. I saw a bunch of other people had tried it, and it blew my mind. I made this online calculator for therapists. I emailed everyone that I worked with, said, "Hey, here's a free calculator. If you," I was too chicken to actually say, like, pay me for it, right? I said, "Here's a free calculator. Use this code, but if you don't, it's like $2.99." And I got 2 sales. And I remember selling this thing online, and I was like, wait, I can just do this? Like, no one's stopping me. There's no like police. And I remember thinking, like, people were like, this is so dumb. Why are you trying to do all this dumb stuff? Stop being dumb. And no one said anything negative. And it really, for me, was a big like light bulb moment where I was like, wait, like I could just do this. So that's the one thing that is a small challenge that you can do to break some beliefs and to move yourself forward. Another challenge is the CE challenge, where basically you give 1 CE training to a group of therapists. I don't know exactly how it works in the APA. I know that for most boards, most LPC boards, most LTSW boards, most LMFT boards, as long as you have someone who's a national provider of continuing ed certify your training, they will take your CEs. So like in Arkansas, right? An LCSW can get LMFT CEs as long as they're certified by like a national board. They don't really care. And this is true in most states. It's not true in all states. And so I put up here in BCC, but I'm sure that there's different organizations that you can do. There's a big social work organization as well. There's also state organizations like TAMFT also certifies people to give training, that sort of thing. So you can just look in your own area. But giving 1 training and having people show up to it is a crazy experience your first time, right? We've seen this. We regularly coach people to give 1 CE training. We often ask them to give a training that is something that people have to have, right? Like ethics, supervision, or a topic that's really charged, like suicidality, so that it's really easy to pull people in. But the big idea is just give 1 training, go through the experience of doing it, and the experience of being an expert. Because if you go through the work of putting together a training, like you know more on that topic than most people do. So that's a big mindset shift as well. So coming down to the end of our time, we have just a few minutes left. And my question for you is, have we accomplished our mission, right? Have we identified the 2 most important variables in having a successful practice? Yes or no? Yes. Have we reviewed strategies to addressing these variables? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes, yes. Okay, great. And have we addressed the biggest barrier to starting a practice? Okay. Paul, do you have any other questions that we need to address before we kick it to our last section here?
Yeah, Dean's got a question. They say, is any part of this different when you still have an in-training license? In my state, I can have my own independent practice as long as I have a supervisor.
Great question. The answer to that is yes. And it depends on a bunch of different things. It depends on, are you really involved in your community? We have people who are big members in their church, and so it's really easy for them to get cash paying clients, right? Can you take insurance as a not fully licensed person? Some states they can. Some states people can't. So it really depends on a bunch of different variables that are probably too specific for us to comment on here. But what I think Paul and I really believe in is get started now as much as you can, because it does take about 6 to 9 months, maybe a little longer, to really get your business up and running. And so the more you can do before you're fully licensed and able to take insurance or able to be independent, that's how much further you're going to be along in the process. Okay. Anything else, Paul, before I kick it over to you?
No more questions in the chat. If you have any, you're welcome to add them in, or we can maybe do some hand raising at the end too. So,
okay. Well, Paul, let's talk about Private Practice Incubator.
Yeah. So, in our work with therapists building their practice, we've decided not to go really broad with tons of therapists, but to go with a few therapists and work very, very deeply. So when we work with somebody, it's more like inpatient work than outpatient work. So like a lot of outpatient work is like you touching with your person every week or two. With our service, it's very hands-on. And so it's not uncommon for us to contact the person we're working with every day for the first month that we're working together. Okay. And we cover tons of stuff. So here's just a basic list of some of the stuff that we go over. A lot of these are live trainings. A couple are recorded. We do a lot of role playing with people working with, like answering a phone, talking to a client about a billing issue, talking to a client about a therapeutic rupture, right? And essentially, we can take you from ground zero all the way through insurance credentialing and all these other things, right? Now, a lot of the stuff you can find online. So we recommend you do all the research you can to get what you want for as cheaply as possible and the best quality you can. And so for a lot of people, it's not working with us. But for a small section of people, they want someone to really walk them through every phase of the process, and that's what we do. So it's usually about a 9-month agreement, and there's a payment piece, and there's a consulting piece, and there's all these other pieces. But we try and cover everything from top to bottom. We're doing things like texting each other, screenshotting, screen sharing, sending voice memos. So it's very hands-on. We try and take a lot of the mystery out of it and try and give you practical things to do. And yeah, it's been really rewarding for us to work with people, and people that are coming out of like a group practice or difficult agency work to have more flexibility, serve populations they really deeply care about, while also providing for themselves and their loved ones. So yeah.
We're opening up a next cohort. The deadline to apply is May 31st at 11:50 p.m. So feel free to go to jordanthecounselor.com/private practice incubator if you want to sign up and get an application. This is my website. You just click right here, take you right to the homepage for the private practice incubator. I do want to give one final thought before we get out of here about why this is important to us. About, I don't know, back in September of last year, my grandfather got pretty sick. He was, he was old. He was my grandfather. And I flew home with my mom and spent about a week with him. And I remember we flew in on like a Thursday. And then on Monday, everyone else, I'm sorry, we flew in on a Thursday, and everyone else in the family flew in that weekend. It was a crazy weekend. Everyone was like there. And then that Monday, everyone else flew home. And my grandfather was just in the hospital by himself. And I thought to myself, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. And luckily, because I own my own business, I could stay and I could work online. And so I stayed, and we stayed for the rest of that week. I think we stayed for about 10 days total. And it was just so valuable to me to be able to have the freedom to do that and the flexibility to do that. And I think that's sort of what you get when you run a practice that is your own practice. You get your time back, which is the only thing that we really have in this life. And we can spend that time on the people that matter the most and the moments that matter the most. And so while what Paul and I do is a business, I think for us, it has a much deeper feel and tone to it. And that's what we want for all of you. That when the time comes and you need to spend the time, the way that you need to spend the time, you have the ability to do that. So yeah, that's it. If any of you have questions, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'll be sending out an email after this with some follow-up stuff. And of course, you'll get the recording of this as well. That's it for today. Thank you for all coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Michelle, Yuja, any closing thoughts before we get out of here today? Let me stop recording.